For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
So, Craig, you know, I must admit, I cheated on Dunkin' Donuts the other day. I went down to Cane's Donuts.
Cane's? I've never even heard of that.
Cane's is the world famous donuts. They're down in Saugus, Massachusetts.
Yeah, well, they're not that famous if I haven't heard of them.
No, they've been on the Food Network. You need to go down there, okay? Because I love my Dunkin' Donuts. I'm here now. I'm getting my coffee. Dunk's is close, easy to get to. Cane's is like an hour drive. Worth it. Creme brulee donut. That's all I'm going to say. Creme brulee.
But you are
donut.
like a creme brulee fanatic.
It's true.
It's true. Have been for as long as I've known you, which is way longer than we're even
Second part of this story, though, coffee roll the size of your head. Not exaggerating at all.
Get behind, literally.
At all. So check that out. If you're near if you're in Saugus, Massachusetts, you're down there for some random reason, look up Cane's Donuts in the Foursquare. Find it. Go quest it out. It's worth your time. Anyway, now back. Sorry, Dunkin' Donuts. He's giving me the evil eye now, Craig. Because I'm talking about
way to go.
He's not happy with me.
Now
can I? If I buy a double large, can I sit here? Okay, cool. All right. Anyway,
there you go.
So, Craig, I have to ask you because I see you've got this giant box here in Dunkin' Donuts, and you're going through it.
I do. I can't help it.
You keep looking through this stuff, and is that your Dwarven Forge order?
Russ, you got to understand. First of all, when I got my Dwarven Forge dungeon set last year, I got super excited. I tweeted out pictures of the boxes. It came, I think, roughly around the same time. But this year has been rotten. All kinds of stuff went wrong. There are injuries galore. All kinds of bad stuff was happening. So the play has really taken on a life of its own and really taken over everything. But you know what hasn't changed, Russ? You know what hasn't failed me at all?
What's that?
Dwarven Forge.
Really? So
Dwarven Forge Caverns, which I was way more excited about, came at roughly the same. These are it's very intriguing to me that of all the Kickstarters that I have done, not a lot, especially when you compare them to you've done way more than me, and then there's Will who's done way more than everyone else on the planet.
Right.
But of all the Kickstarters I've done, only 2 have come in exactly on time. Mm-hmm. And both of them were Dwarven Forge.
Nice.
I mean, it's ridiculously crazy. And these are not simplistic Kickstarters. These are complex. How many of this set? How many of that set do you want? You get upgrades. You get entire boxes of extra stuff, depending on how much other stuff you got.
We should say this is going to sound like an advertisement. This is not an ad.
This is not an ad.
Dwarven Forge has paid us nothing.
We get nothing free from Dwarven.
You paid out of your own pocket you've backed them twice now in Kickstarter.
I have backed them twice well over $1,000.
The first time you got a pallet. The second time you got 2 pallets of stuff?
No, I got half a pallet.
Half a pallet, pardon me.
It's interesting because basically what happened was I went overboard. It was my first big Kickstarter where I was like, I'm just going to do it, man.
Right.
And it happened to land at just the time when I had just got my I don't remember what check I had just got, but I had more money than was probably good for me to have in my bank account. And I went nuts. I got 5 sets, which means 5 sets of stretch goal boxes. The way Dwarven Forge does it, it's awesome. The stretch goals are by piece, and so you get a stretch goal set for every basic set that you get, and the stretch goal set gets bigger and bigger, and that's what expands, basically. That's where your little reward comes in, I guess. And what it ultimately adds to in a successful Kickstarter, which both of these were, using this format, is for every basic set you basically get another set of awesome, cool additional pieces. Mm-hmm. And so I did 5 basic sets of the dungeon, which mean I got 5 basic sets, 5 stretch goal sets, and then I did a bunch of other stuff also for just a ridiculous amount of money. And I got them, and I got all excited, and I tweeted it out, and I painted them all up, and I tweeted all those out, and I was super excited. And then when the time came for me to finally get a chance to use them for a role-playing game, I was like, oh my God, I've got so much stuff. It's literally too much, and I can't do – unless I'm going to spend a weekend building the dungeon ahead of time, I can't use it all.
Right.
And so what we ended up doing when we used it, when we played Accursed, was to actually build it room by room as the dungeon progressed. And it worked awesome, and it looks beautiful. It's amazing. It's awesome stuff. It's everything I've ever wanted. I mean, I can't tell you how long I have wanted Dwarven Forge stuff. Like every Gen Con, I would just go over to the Dwarven Forge.
Drool on it. Right.
The really cool. It's all set up to make it look like a forge.
Awesome. Yeah,
It's really cool. And I would just drool on this stuff. And so when I got the dungeon stuff, painted it all up, in the moment using it, I have way too much. And so I knew going into the caverns, I knew two things. One, I didn't need that much, but two, the caverns is what really hooked me from the very first time I saw them, and that's what I really wanted. I got the dungeons,
even though the dungeons work just fine and give you that sense of walking through rooms that looks cool, you still needed caverns.
The caverns was what I loved, and oddly enough, the water caverns is really what sold me. That's what hooked into my imagination. I loved it. I knew I needed to get it. And so when the Cavern Kickstarter came out last year, I was like, oh, okay. But I needed to rein myself in, and it was hard. I wanted to go with 5 sets again. I knew that was too much. So what I did was I went with 3 sets, and I sat back and I waited. And, of course, some of the stretch goals are add-on kits that you can get. And eventually the add-on kit for Cavern Water came out.
Yep.
And then I was done. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I ended up getting exactly the same number of sets,
right, and
paying about the same amount of money. But I got 3 basic sets and then 3 stretch goal sets and then a bunch of water tiles. And I got a bunch of narrow corridors. So I have 10-foot corridors that I can link all these caves together. And there was one evil accessory set that I got that comes with an Indiana Jones big stone ball that rolls after you. I got an elevation set that comes with bridges and big blocks that you can add to make 2 double level dungeon. I mean, not dungeons, but caverns, and it came and it's awesome. I have not been able to do much with it, but I was super, super excited.
So let me ask you this: so is this pre-painted? Or is it you got to dry brush it, or how much prep work do you have to do to get this from out of the box to actually usable on the tabletop?
It's interesting you should ask that, Russ. They offer both pre-painted or what they call dungeon gray, which actually is basically the material itself is sort of a rubberized plastic resin. Not really resin. It's not brittle at all. You can bend it. You can drive over it with a truck. There's all kinds of stuff on YouTube of the ways they show you that how durable this stuff is, and it will always bend back into position. And it's a dark gray, almost black. And the way they made it, it doesn't need to be primed, so you can paint it just as is with dry brushing.
So you can just jump right in there, start dry brushing, and you already get a good look.
Exactly. Just like one level of dry brushing and automatically it's looking pretty damn good. And so I did unpainted both times, knowing one that I'm dry brushing is something I can do. And 2, if you get the cheaper unpainted one, you can get more stuff. So I got the unpainted stuff. But the cool thing that they do is, and this is going to sound like an ad, and it's not. Let's just harken back for a moment to what the Lost Chapters started out as. It was us sitting around tables literally at Dunkin' Donuts.
Yes.
And after a game night, we would chat. And so what you're actually getting is Russ and this is a real Lost Chapter.
This is me going, holy crap, that's a lot of Dwarven Forge. How are you going to use all that? That's what that's literally me going in. It's like I walked into Dunkin' Donuts like I am right now, and I see Craig sitting there sipping his coffee like he is right now. He's got a box of stuff open on the table, and I look out, and there's his car with a trunk full and a trailer attached with more in it. So I'm like, wow, that's a lot of Dwarven Forge. And like anybody, you'd say, gee, how are you going to use all that Dwarven? So first of all, so you're getting it dry brushed up. So how long does it take you to dry brush all these?
I mean, it's really, really cool. Well, what I wanted to go back and do was, so you can get it pre-painted. Now, the next thing that they did was Stephen Picorni, who is the founder of Dwarven Forge. He came out last year with the first Kickstarter with his own line of paints, which is exactly the same colors that they use for their pre-paints. So it was like a $32, and these bottles are enormous. They're like giant ketchup bottles from a diner, each one. And so you get you for $32, you got 4 colors, but enough to like paint like a real cavern or a real dungeon, and they're the exact same colors. And I did that because I thought someday I might want to buy some pre-painted stuff. and it's going to be the exact same colors. It's going to match. And so what you do is you dry brush all of, and you do like all the pieces at once. When you get 5 sets and then you've got 5 stretch goal sets and you've got all the other stuff, you have a crap ton of tiles to paint.
I'm going to say you've got a lot of dungeon. That's what
it's a lot of what I figured now is between the dungeon and the caverns and what I got, which I'll talk about in a second, at Gen Con, I can actually do a 4x8 foot table now.
Holy crap.
So, yeah. So I'm thinking eventually I want to try to do a miniatures game. I don't
know.
You
do a miniature war game in a dungeon.
In a dungeon with caverns and all
full
kinds of
terrain.
I mean,
that'd be awesome. How about Infinity in caverns?
That's awesome. That I don't know like how it would work, but I think you could be able to do that. So yeah, so I painted it all up, and it painted probably in about a week. I did the whole thing because it's not that hard, not including all of the dungeon dressing stuff. But I mean columns, just all kinds of really cool stuff. And then I had it, and I went out and paid another $50 for an enormous wheeled toolbox that I saw online that people were using to organize and transport their giant stash. And I got all excited. I hadn't used it. And then the Accursed game came up, and I was like, Dave, I want to use my dungeon tiles. And Dave got some also, but he didn't paint his up yet. So he was like, okay, we'll use yours. And we used it, and it was awesome. And like I said, the one thing about the dungeon tiles, I think, that you have to keep in mind is you cannot be anal retentive about your dungeon.
Right.
So if you're one of those guys who plans it out to each square foot and it's got to be that way for the whole plan to work, then dungeon tiles are probably not for you unless you're going to use the aforementioned two days to build the whole thing ahead of time. But if you're kind of fast and loose and you just want to get a cool look and have something cool for your models to move through and fight through, then these are perfect because what it allows you to do is, like, Dave would show me the next room and I would just take the pieces that I would need to roughly make it out. And we would make the next room, and then we would make the next room, and then we would make the next room. And I would be like, so Dave, are we going to need to come back here, or should I like pull stuff up? And he was like, oh, no. You're going to be coming back. So we would just keep building it, and it would just keep getting bigger and bigger, one room at a time, which wouldn't take that long. And so ultimately, I don't need all these tiles that I have, but I'm glad I have them because someday I'm going to make a 4x8 foot table.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. So I do kind of struggle with how you practically use this. So just to be clear, so like I just been playing the D&D 5e thing, and what I was doing with that, I don't have obviously this stuff, but I have some descent tiles and I have some dungeon tiles from various sources. There's some from the guys at Weird. I got some of those. I got the Terror Clips. I've got some stuff from the official D&D stuff. I've got all that stuff. And it's all got the 1-inch squares on it, which is handy for D&D. And then I did like you're describing. So as the party moves from one room, like they're in a 10-foot wide corridor, I have some quarter pieces I put down. And I don't get super anal about, well, on the map I'm trying to replicate, it's 40 degrees to the left of this, you just kind of,
or it's going to be exactly 50 feet long.
Right, and then you walk in.
These are in 2-foot sections.
Right, you open into a room, and there's like exactly these things here. I just kind of like roughly, well, it's a big room, and it's got. So it sounds like that's sort of the same thing you're doing, where you've got your stuff organized. Now, how fast does it go from like the party steps out of one room into another? Can you have that next room ready? Is it something, is your stuff so organized and
yeah, well,
how do you do that?
It's a good question, and it completely comes down to how you organize and arrange your collection is. If it's organized well, like mine is now, all the corner pieces are in one area, all of the regular wall pieces, all the doors. And the toolbox is awesome because it breaks down basically into 3 smaller toolboxes. So you just put that against a wall wherever you're playing. And the party walks into the table, the room, and while the DM is describing the room, if I have a little image of it that I can use, I can build it. And by the time he's done describing the ambiance, there's a new room there.
So he can say to you kind of like, hey, Craig, I'm going to need a, 15-foot wide by 20-foot long room with some kind of water feature in the middle. Can you do that for me?
Yep,
and you kind of
absolutely.
build it. So that's cool. So do you recommend that so you think it'd be hard if the DM was the guy managing the collection as well, would the game slow down? Is it easier if your dungeon tile guy is not the dungeon master?
I think so, but at the same time, if I was the DM and I was doing it at my house, I would probably have it set up ahead of time.
Well, let me ask you that. So then I was thinking, well, that would be the thing to do. So the DM has this thing, and he's like you, and he's got so much dungeon tile that he could do a 4x8 foot table. Right. He could probably have the entire dungeon laid out before the players arrive, But then when the players walk in, aren't they going to see the entire dungeon? Fog
No,
of War go away?
Russ,
How do you handle
and
that?
I'll tell you why. Just like we'll harken back to the good old Daka days. And I can't even remember what we built it for, but remember I did a 4x8 foot cavern table.
You did. You cut it out of polystyrene.
Yeah, I cut it out of polystyrene, 2-inch polystyrene.
I think it was Mordheim, wasn't it?
Chamber. Was it Mordheim?
I can't remember. I thought it was Mordheim.
It was either Mordheim or like a weird
or Inquisitor or something.
Like, no, it wasn't Inquisitor because the only Inquisitor scale was ridiculous. So there was a 4x8 foot Inquisitor table, but cut into two 4x4 foot sections. Right. We talk about that someday because that was an awesome table. No, I can't remember. I think it must have been Mordheim.
I think it
must have been Mordheim. And so, yeah. And what I did was, and I'm not taking credit for this because I saw it at a convention, but every room had a foam core sort of lid that would hide it, and so you just and I even glued little handles on each lid, so you just lift it up and reveal what was in the room.
So you could have some kind of cover like paper.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that for a regular like that was for a big event that we had at DACA, and then we could use the table for all kinds of other stuff. I wouldn't do that. Like I wouldn't do fancy lids or anything, but I would do you with construction paper or even pieces of felt. There's or I've heard of people using blankets or just one blanket that you can kind of sort of pull up as you go as you reveal things. And so there's a bunch of different ways you can reveal it. But to go back to your original question about how would it be useful if you're the tile guy and the GM. I think if you can multitask even a little bit, like I could talk and set up a little room quickly. Yeah. And I think you could do that. I think most GMs, just by the nature of the personality type that sort of gravitates towards that job in a role-playing group, wouldn't have a hard time saying like, he could also even Bob Ross it. Like, and in this little corner, we have a little happy skeleton. And over here, you've got a little completely innocuous little treasure chest that I'm sure isn't a mimic.
Right.
And
is in no way tracked.
Exactly. In this room, this door sort of emanates safety. Absolutely. Nothing bad behind this door.
Now, when you're designing the dungeons, do you find so I guess there's really two ways you could use this, right? One of them is that you've got a pre-designed dungeon that either someone else made, so you're running a module, for example, or maybe you made before you had your dungeon stuff and you're trying to fit it to it. Do you find yourself, though, now looking at your vast collection with some of the more unique rooms thinking, I'm now going to, like, I'm inspired to actually center part of my dungeon around this really cool room, and it's actually going to look just like this?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, Russ. Absolutely. But to go back to the Gen
I did not give him these questions at all, folks. These are coming right off the top of my head.
We're actually going without a single note tonight.
No, it's not.
So, yeah, this is all exactly what happens when Russ and I sit down, and one of us is super excited about it, and the other one's amused.
Pass me that creme brulee there, please.
Exactly. You're welcome to it. So when I got the dungeon sets, I got a bunch of really cool stuff. And that year at Gen Con, I went to the was it Seven Winds medals?
Yeah, right.
They're the people that make the BattleTech metal miniatures, and they do all kinds of other cool stuff. Iron Wind medals. And I think, and they were having like this big sale on all this stuff, and there was a bunch of dungeon dressing in there. This is the year, longtime listeners will remember this story where I thought I was going to be spending about $15 and it was actually like 40 when I got to the cash register, and I was like, 40, oh my God. But I did it anyway. Some of the things I bought were these really big skulls, really cool like stone skulls, and I painted those up with exactly the same colors as the dungeons. So I have like a really cool sort of necromancery sort of thing. I have a fountain that I painted up to be a really cool water effect. I have like dungeon like dungeon gratings, like there's a dungeon cell inside the floor kind of stuff. So I've got all kinds of really cool stuff, and actually the first Reaper Bones had a bunch of dungeon dressing that I got 2 of the stuff, and so I've got all kinds of really cool stuff like altars and things like that I really, really like. One thing I've always liked almost as much as I like the catacomb, the dungeon water, the cavern water sets, is the idea of a catacombs, yes. like from Indiana Jones, right. And was it The Last Crusade? Yeah, where he was.
Is there a mine car?
No. Oh God, that movie doesn't exist to me. And So I've always wanted that. I thought that would be really cool. I have a couple tombs, sepulchers kind of stuff already. And then, so this year at Gen Con, I, of course, went over to Dwarven Forge, said hello to Jeff. Hello, Jeff. And he's a listener. And was really excited because they had brand new sets called the Catacomb set.
Ooh.
And the Catacomb set is ridiculously crazy because it matches all of the normals, all of the regular dungeon sets that they have, except that instead of the normal walls, there's niches with skeletons in all of them.
Ooh, neat.
Okay, but wait, there's more. There's these 4 awesome corner pieces that have raised diazes on them with actual tea lights built into the piece that flicker, and you've got different resin clear pieces that you can change in. So it's a fire that's flickering, or it's a crystal ball that's flickering, or it's a crystal skull that's flickering. That movie doesn't exist to me either. So there's those 4 little things, and then there's columns made out of skulls, and then there's individual like little wall piece, standalone freestanding wall pieces that have little niches with skeletons in them. There's corner pieces with skeletons in them. There's wall pieces that are just all skulls. So it's very like Paris catacomb-esque with all the bones and everything.
Cool.
Then there's Catacombs at 2, which is one really awesome floor piece, but then a fountain this is the really cool thing. The fountain has a middle piece again that glows. And the fountain is full of gold, if you like inside, like gold coins. The fountain, like somebody like just dumped an entire dungeon's worth of gold coins into this fountain, and it's got like cool skulls all around it. And then that piece has 2 really long pieces that have flickering gems in it also. I mean, it's just crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. And I saw it and I went, I really want that. and then the strangest thing happened to me at Gen Con, and there wasn't a single game I wanted to buy. And I was wandering around all depressed, like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Wait, Dwarven Forge.
And I was like, Dwarven Forge, Catacombs. And because I painted it using the Picorni paints, the Catacomb sets match perfectly with my dungeon tile sets.
Oh, see?
So now that I have everything, and one of the cool extra sets that I got with the cavern sets was it's called Evil Editions or something. It's just really cool little accent pieces. One of them actually, or I think that might even be one of the stretch goals. It's a really cool, like the dungeon set wall piece. Mm-hmm. Just like the regular wall tile, but the wall has a giant hole knocked into it.
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's how you transition from your caverns
to your dungeon.
Nice. And I can do that into the catacomb. So you've got dungeon section into cavern section into catacomb section. And and that's how I get an entire 4x8 foot table.
Nice.
That's like all kind of themed out. And this is not a sales pitch because it's sold out. The cool thing about the resin sets, they cost a lot more. They look beautiful. It's crazy that they're pre-painted to the quality that they're painted. But they sell out like that, man.
Now, are these flexible enough where you could basically build a Descent dungeon out of them, or is Descent too particular about
Probably not, because Descent is really particular in that the tiles are like, I mean, you could, because they're gridded. They're gridded. The only big complaint that I've heard people have that I've kind of like, I share your concern, but it's just too cool looking, is that they're on a 1-inch grid, which is awesome, but the walls are actually placed on top of the grid.
So there's not more than an
edges,
inch.
Yeah, on the edges there's like a half inch.
So well, yeah, right.
That's a kind of dead space if you're really gonna like going for that. So the way to do that is either, and it's really hard unless there's a special set for making narrow corridors in the dungeons that are 10 feet, which we all, with all of our graph paper through the years, that's like everybody's standard is a 10-foot wide corridor,
right?
So without that set, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle with a 10-foot corridor, unless there's ways to cheat it, and I've done that, which is cool too. But
so let me ask you this: so you've got this great looking, fantastic. When they're in a dungeon, it looks amazing. So what do you do when they have to have a tavern brawl?
Oh,
now you're like, what do you do? I mean,
you don't use this stuff. The rumor is that their third Kickstarter, which will come later on this year, is going to be. They do have a tavern set.
Oh wow, I didn't realize
and
that.
It's called Medieval Building Expansion.
So I was going to ask you, like, do you feel like you're compelled to always put your heroes in a dungeon because you've got the best terrain for it?
Yeah, sadly, I think yes.
Does that sort of happen? It's like. And you're overlaying. Oh, you fall through a sinkhole and you're back in a cavern. Oh, and you're
I mean, what I have, like when we were playing the Iron Kingdoms game that you were running,
right.
Like I have all those brick buildings and everything, so we could do an exterior, like a surface city.
Yeah, if you're a miniature gamer, you've already got outdoor stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I justified my original Dwarven Forge Kickstarter purchase because of your Iron Kingdoms role-playing game.
See?
Because I know that now I got one of the many expansions that I got was or add-on packs was the add-on pack that does castle windows.
Oh yes, right.
So now, because I remember you were describing a village that we were going to go to, and it was a bunch of little stone buildings, and I can now create that with Dwarven Forge. So I can actually create a village where each little house is separate. It's got its windows, it's got its doors. There's no ceilings, but for role playing purposes, you don't really need the ceilings.
Well, that's really cool.
So there's options, and if you're like if you are one of these Dwarven Forge fanatics, which sadly I don't have the money to be, there are the medieval building sets.
Wow.
And they come with the system is awesome. Again, if you don't mind that little wasted half inch around the corners and everything, if that bothers you, and I know it bothers some people, if it bothers you, this isn't for you. But aesthetically, I'm more than happy with, paying that price. But the systems all work the same. So there's corner pieces that are, 90-degree corners. There's wall pieces that's just a flat wall that's empty all around except for one wall that's straight up. There's floor pieces. Then there's door pieces. So the basic system is the same for each of the themes. And so the medieval building set comes with corners and windows and walls and doors and floors. And you can build, and they're all, it looks like a Tudor or Elizabethan sort of building where it's like stucco and and timbers. And so you can build like any kind of room that you need that's a tavern or anything. I've seen some amazing stuff on the internet and YouTube and whatnot where people have made enormous multi-story taverns and things like that. Wow. So you can do it. You can do it easily.
So let me ask you, as we start to run out of time here, we're getting the evil eye from the Dunks dude.
Yeah. Well, that's probably because you were talking about whatever that other place was.
Canes,
right? Yeah.
So let me ask you this though. So this must be the hardest thing to deal with when you have all this amazing terrain, and that is that your players want to bring their own heroes, and there's that one guy that doesn't paint his dude.
Oh yeah, that's not.
How do you deal with that?
Oh, that's interesting, Russ. And to prove that it's not an ad, I'll talk about another company. When we did the Accursed. Or accursed. I'm still not. There's two things now in my life that people have on Twitter of all things have made me doubt my own memory. I can't remember if it's accursed or accursed.
It's accursed.
And I can't remember if it's Golem Arcana or Golem Arcana. But anyway. And I don't care. Well, I liked both games.
The best part about you got to be like me and just don't own the fact that you can pronounce anything, and then you're fine.
That's true. See, there you go.
I can say whatever I want because I don't know how to pronounce anything.
From this concern.
Right.
Yeah. So I did the original Kickstarter for the Reaper Bones, which ended up with over 250 models that I have a massive collection for. So I don't think. Well, that's not true because you would take the challenge and you would beat me. So I'm not gonna frame it as a challenge, but I will just say it's very difficult for anybody to come up with a combination of gender, class, and race that I can't recreate with this 250 model set that I now have.
Halfling Pirate Bard.
Done.
Nice. That's pretty impressive.
So, I have no idea. But I do know that I had an entire collection of halflings. So it's going to be something. And pirates. So it's going to be something in there. But the key was when we were doing Accursed, which of course is all like your player characters are monsters. You'd think, oh my God, there's no way you're going to get a player character model. Well, not only does did the first Reaper Vampire have that, but they're really, cool models and they're really quick to paint up. And so I painted the entire party's models ahead of time. It only took me a couple days.
So basically you have just signed up for the fact you're going to paint their stuff so that it doesn't clash with your dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm going to use my dungeon tiles, you're either bringing a painted model or you're going to tell me that you can't do that so that I can shame you and then paint one for you. And it's a win-win for me because I've got 250 models, most of which I'm probably never going to paint. And it's not like I'm giving you the model. I'm going to paint it and then put it back in my collection. For your collection. So it's always painted.
That makes sense.
Exactly.
Okay, fair. So you basically can run. You have the models now and the dungeons to pretty much run any fantasy campaign through a dungeon or cavern.
Exactly. I've got the dungeons, caverns, and characters
and monsters.
And monsters.
Yeah.
Well, you can always use more monsters.
Well, combined with your descent, you must have some descent guys too.
Oh, I've got that's what we dug out for the Iron Kingdoms
right.
games.
So we've got descent because I've been using my descent stuff. You've got all the dungeon command stuff.
Yeah,
you add that, and then you add your Reaper. You probably have most monsters covered.
I think I have most monsters covered, but when for me, what I always love is being able to flood the board with one type of monster.
Oh, yes, like all
because that's what would really happen.
Right.
So I don't think, and even the Reaper bones, like I think you only end up with like 6 or 10 skeletons.
Even like Descent, you've got maybe 6 skeletons and 6.
Yeah, exactly. So I probably have enough if I put all those collections together.
There you go.
So so I can do pretty much whatever I want. Yes. Now all I need to do is find some time.
Well, Craig, thank you for sharing all the details on how you built out your awesome.
Thank you for being interested, Russ.
And
it's nice to be able to talk about this stuff.
No problem. I talk to you more, but the guy's going to kick me out.
I think he
wants my creme brulee donut.
Enough, he's leaving me alone. But
he wants my creme brulee donut, Craig. I can tell. He wants to know the secret sauce, how to make it.
Oh, God.
So, all right.
Get the Mark of Cain donut. That's what the creme brulee is going to be the Mark of Cain.
Creme brulee. All right. Creme brulee. So we'll see you all next time on The Full Show.
On The Big Show.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.